The night was quiet. Elias could sense the tension the moment he stepped inside the apartment. He had been with Mason for over a decade, and the heavy silence felt different this time. It wasn't the familiar, comfortable quiet of long companionship. It was brittle, like thin ice over dark water. A single suitcase stood by the door, a stark, compact shape in the dim entryway light. Mason was in the living room, his posture rigid. He didn't turn. "Where were you?" His voice was low, stripped of any warmth. Elias shrugged out of his coat, the scent of whiskey and a crisp, unfamiliar cologne clinging to the wool. "Business. You know how it is." He moved to the sideboard, pouring himself a measure of bourbon. The amber liquid caught the light. "What's with the luggage? Another grand exit? Planning to haunt the diner down the street for a few hours?" This had been their pattern. Mason would storm out with an empty suitcase after a fight, a dramatic gesture that never went further than a long walk or a solitary meal. Elias would wait, secure in the knowledge that Mason would return, that the deep anchor of their shared history would always pull him back. He took a slow sip, the burn familiar down his throat. Mason finally turned. His face was pale, but his eyes held a flat, exhausted resolve Elias had never seen before. "It's not a performance this time, Elias. I'm leaving." A flicker of irritation cut through Elias's calm. He set the glass down with a soft click. "Leave then. But we both know how this ends. You'll be back in a week. Everything you have is here." "Everything I had," Mason corrected, his voice quiet. "It's gone. I'm done." Elias studied him, a strange, cold feeling beginning to uncurl in his chest. He decided to prod at the one wound he knew was still raw. "Have you asked about him? About Leo?" Mason's breath hitched, just slightly. A victory, Elias thought. "I know you've been seeing him," Mason said. "The college kid. I've seen the pictures." Elias allowed a thin smile. "He's young, full of a certain fire. It reminds me of someone, of how you used to be back when we were scraping by. He's uncomplicated. He's only ever been with me." The words hung in the air, laced with the old, unspoken accusation. The memory of that night 3 years ago was a ghost that haunted every room between them. When Elias's startup was on the brink, a silent, monstrous deal had been brokered in a private room of an upscale lounge. Mason had gone in his place, armed with nothing but desperation. He'd come out with the lifeline Elias needed and a piece of his soul shattered. Elias's company had soared on that blood money, but their relationship had never recovered. Elias had accepted the salvation but could not bear the cost, and he had punished Mason for it ever since, by never letting him forget he was somehow tainted. Mason looked past him, toward the dark window. "You should be with someone uncomplicated. You should be happy." The words were hollow, devoid of the old, searing pain that, more than anything, unsettled Elias. "This is about Leo, isn't it?" Elias pressed, stepping closer. The bourbon on his breath mingled with the foreign cologne. "If you're jealous, Mason, we can talk. But these tantrums are beneath you." "It was never about Leo," Mason said, and there was a finality in his tone that made Elias pause. "It was about that lounge. It was about you knowing exactly what would happen to me that night and letting me walk in anyway. You got everything you wanted. The company, the respect. And you got to feel like the wounded party. For years." Elias's face went still. The carefully constructed narrative of the past, where he was the long-suffering partner betrayed by circumstance, crumbled under Mason's quiet gaze. He had never admitted it, not even to himself in the deepest hours of the night. The shame and guilt had been too corrosive, so he had transformed them into coldness, into distance, into finding boys who echoed a purer version of the man he destroyed. "That's not true," Elias began, but the protest was weak, automatic. Mason picked up his suitcase. "It doesn't matter anymore. Be happy with Leo. Be free. I'm giving you your freedom." "Mason," Elias said, the name sharp on his tongue. "Our life, it doesn't exist on paper. Everything you are, I built for you. You walk out that door with nothing. A faint, almost sad smile touched Mason's lips. I'll manage. He walked past him, the wheels of the suitcase a soft rumble on the polished hardwood. You'll be back, Elias called after him, the composure cracking. You don't know how to be anywhere else. The door closed with a soft, definitive click. The apartment was suddenly, oppressively silent. Elias stood frozen, listening to the echo of his own words fade into nothing. He picked up his bourbon glass and threw it against the wall. It exploded in a shower of crystal and amber, the sound violently loud in the quiet. He braced his hands on the sideboard, head bowed. He just needed to wait. Mason would come back. He always did. Across the city, Mason stood on the sidewalk, the cold night air sharp in his lungs. The pain in his gut was a constant, gnawing companion now. He pulled the folded paper from his coat pocket, the clinical type stark under the streetlight. Mason Wright, 29. Stage 4 gastric adenocarcinoma. The finality of it was almost a relief. No more waiting. No more hoping for a love that had curdled into resentment years ago. He thought of the boy, Leo. Young, bright, possessive. He'd seen the social media posts. Elias, his arm around the kid's shoulders at some trendy restaurant. A tower of elaborate desserts on the table. Elias, who claimed he never indulged in sweets. Mason's last birthday had come and gone without a word. The dinner he'd cooked growing cold and congealed on the table. He'd sat in the dark, a familiar, childhood loneliness washing over him, waiting for a man who never came. He needed a friend. He hailed a cab and gave an address. The door was answered by a man with sleep-tousled brown hair and startled blue eyes. Mason? Jesus, what time is it? Ben's gaze dropped to the suitcase. Get in here. You're freezing. Ben's apartment was comfortably cluttered. Guitars leaning against walls, sheets of music on the coffee table. He made strong, black coffee without asking. Mason told him everything. The sickness, the diagnosis, the final, ugly confrontation. Ben listened, his large hands clenched into fists on his knees. When Mason finished, Ben shot up from the couch, his frame tense. That bastard. I'll kill him. I swear to God I will. Ben, no. Mason reached for his wrist, a wave of weakness and pain making him gasp. It's not worth it. Ben was immediately at his side, anger replaced by panic. Hey, what's wrong? Where does it hurt? His voice was thick. What kind of cancer is it again? Stomach? Liver? Stomach? Mason whispered, letting Ben guide him to the sofa. They said maybe 2 months. If I don't do the treatments, we'll get you the best doctors, Ben said fiercely. I have money saved, it would buy me weeks, Ben. In a hospital bed. I don't want that. Mason looked up at his old friend, at the genuine fear in his eyes. I have a list. Things I want to do with the time I have left. Can you help me? Ben's eyes glistened. He swallowed hard and nodded. Whatever you need. For as long as you need. The first item was simple. For years, Mason had quietly admired an actor named James Ford. Not in a way that involved fan clubs or merchandise, just a steady appreciation for his craft, watching his career arc from indie darling to mainstream fame and then into a quieter period. Ben, with a stubbornness Mason had always admired, spent days sending messages to every contact he could find. To their shock, James Ford agreed to a meeting. He arrived without an entourage, dressed in a simple leather jacket and jeans. He'd flown in on a day off. In a quiet corner of a downtown hotel lounge, he listened as Mason spoke, not as a star to a fan, but as one man to another facing an ending. Most people would tell you to fight, James said finally, his voice thoughtful. And I could connect you with resources if you wanted. But if it were me, I think I'd want to choose how I spent the days I had left. He offered a hand. Thank you for telling me, for all the years of support. Mason shook his hand, a sense of profound peace settling over him. You'll find your way back to the work you love. I know it. Later, Ben drove them to their old university campus. The town had changed, chain stores replacing the quirky local spots. Ben pointed out a window. That used to be that burrito place, remember? You'd always give Elias the good chunks of steak from yours. He kept talking, a stream of nostalgia that was entirely centered on Mason. How Mason looked in a certain shirt, a joke he'd told, the way he'd share his fries. The subtext hummed between them, unacknowledged but felt. They decided to get lunch at an old pizza joint that had somehow survived. The bell on the door jingled, and the past walked in. There, in a back booth, was Elias with Leo. The younger man was laughing, leaning into Elias's space as Elias carefully picked peppers off a slice for him. It was a scene of tender, mundane care that Mason had not received in years. Ben saw red. He was across the room before Mason could stop him, his fist connecting with Elias's jaw with a sickening crack. Chaos erupted. Leo leapt up, a protective snarl on his youthful face. What the hell is wrong with you? Elias wiped a trickle of blood from his lip, his icy gaze locking past Ben onto Mason. Interesting bodyguard you have, he said, his voice dripping with contempt. Finally made it official with your longtime admirer? The old, sharp sting of his words failed to land. Instead, a deeper, physical pain blossomed in Mason's abdomen, stealing his breath. He swayed, and Ben was instantly there, an arm around his shoulders. Mason leaned into the solid warmth, and something in Elias's eyes fractured. Yeah, Mason said, his voice tight but clear. He laced his fingers with Ben's, feeling the other man startle, then hold on tight. We're together. You have a problem with that? Elias said nothing, but a muscle ticked in his jaw. Leo sneered. Good. Elias has been wanting to end things forever. He just felt sorry for you. Let's go, Mason whispered to Ben. I feel sick. As they turned, Elias's voice, strained and oddly formal, cut through the tense air. Mason, if you come home now, we can discuss this. We have 10 years. That has to count for something. Mason didn't look back. He kept walking, Ben's firm support the only thing holding him upright. Behind them, they heard the crash of a plate shattering against the wall. The next item on the list was a trip to see snow. Mason was a son of the California coast. Real snow was a fairy tale. Ben bundled them onto a plane to Colorado, packing enough thermal layers for an expion. He fussed endlessly, wrapping scarves around Mason's neck, checking his gloves. In a pristine mountain town, Mason saw his first snowflake land and linger on his dark sleeve. He saw the intricate, impossible geometry of it before it melted. He laughed, a real light sound, and made a snowball. The ensuing, gentle scuffle ended with them both breathless in a drift, Ben's strong arms instinctively circling him, their faces inches apart in the crystalline air. For a suspended second, the world was only Ben's wide, shocked eyes and the puff of their mingled breath in the cold. Then Ben scrambled up, muttering about dinner, his ears bright red. That night, over a hearty stew in a log-walled restaurant, Elias's specter intruded via a bartender's phone. He was drunk, desperate, alternating between accusations and pleas. Mason ended the call, removed the SIM card, and dropped it into his water glass. The finality of the gesture was liberating. They returned home to find Elias waiting in the dim hallway of Ben's building. He looked diminished, wearing an old sweater Mason had given him. Mason, we need to talk. I ended it with Leo. Mason kept walking, fishing for his keys. Ben moved to block Elias's path. This is between us, Elias snapped, trying to see past him. It's really not, Mason said, not turning around. I sent him away. Elias's voice broke. Don't you see? He reminded me of you, of how you were before you sacrificed me to save your company. Mason finally faced him, the truth now a weapon he was too tired to wield with anger. You knew those men were there that night. You knew what they were like. You left that information where I'd find it, and you let me go. You got your deal. And you got to spend years pretending the stain was only on me. Elias's face drained of all color. The naked truth, spoken aloud in the fluorescent-lit hallway, was a guillotine. He had no defense because it was the truth he'd been running from. I can explain. Ben didn't let him finish. A guttural sound of rage tore from his throat, and he drove Elias back against the wall, his fists falling with a brutal, rhythmic fury. Elias didn't fight back. He slumped to the floor, his eyes wide and shattered, fixed on Mason. Mason looked down at the ruin of the man he'd once loved. The most revolting thing I ever did was love you. You'll get what's coming to you, Elias. Promise. He touched Ben's arm. Let's go home. Inside, Ben was trembling, a storm of emotion he couldn't voice. Late that night, as Mason drifted towards sleep, he heard Ben's whispered, heartbroken question from the darkness. Mason, were you scared? Did it hurt? The final item on Mason's list was for Ben. Using the money he'd saved from his years with Elias, Mason secretly booked a mid-sized concert venue. He hired a promoter, arranged everything. When he presented the confirmed date to Ben, the big man crumpled, tears streaming down his face. You idiot, Ben choked out. You're supposed to be spending this on yourself. I am, Mason said softly. In the weeks that followed, Ben practiced relentlessly. Mason was his only audience, curled on the couch as Ben's raw, powerful voice filled the small apartment. You'll be front row center, Ben would say, his eyes shining. I'll be playing right to you. Mason would nod and smile, but a deep sadness was growing in him. The pain was more constant now, a heavy tide that left him weaker after each ebb. He watched Ben, so alive and focused, and knew with a terrible certainty that he would not be in that front row seat. The night it happened, the rain was a soft patter against the windows. Mason was cold, a deep chill that no blanket could touch. Ben, he murmured. Sing for me? The one from the road trip. Ben, half asleep, began to hum, then sing, his voice a low, comforting rumble in the dark. It was an old folk song about going home. Mason listened, the words blurring into a gentle sound that carried him away. He slipped into unconsciousness with the feeling of a hand, rough and warm, holding his own. Ben finished the song to silence. Lame, right? Putting you to sleep with my... He reached over to adjust the blanket and his world stopped. The funeral was held on a gray, drizzling morning. Ben moved through it like a ghost, the grief a physical weight. He was standing by the simple urn when a commotion erupted at the entrance. Elias stumbled in. He looked haunted, wearing a cheap, ill-fitting suit. He stared at the photograph of Mason, a young, smiling picture from their college days, as if it held an answer he couldn't decipher. Why? The word was a ragged plea. Why didn't he tell me he was sick? I could have fixed it. I had the resources. Ben walked over and shoved him hard. Get on your knees. You don't get to stand in his presence. Elias collapsed not from the push, but from the weight of his own void. He beat his fists against the floor until they bled. Why? He sobbed again. Then his eyes fell on a simple notepad placed beside the flowers. Mason's neat handwriting. A short list. He saw the checked boxes. Meet James Ford. See Real Snow. Get Ben his show. The last item was blank. Elias stared, his breath hitching. A terrible, jealous understanding dawned. His last wishes. None of them are about me. He didn't want me in his life, even at the end. The realization was a deeper prison than any he could imagine. As if on cue, the distant wail of sirens grew louder. 2 police officers entered the quiet space. Elias Vance? You need to come with us. Ben watched, a cold satisfaction cutting through his grief. Mason, in his final days, had meticulously compiled and submitted every piece of evidence he had on Elias's financial improprieties, the shady deals that had built his empire. The revenge was not born of malice, but of a final, sweeping act of justice. Elias didn't resist as the officers pulled him to his feet. He kept staring at Mason's photo, his expression one of utter devastation. The man who had always controlled everything had finally been checkmated by the quiet man he'd thrown away. The concert was sold out. The stage was vast, the lights blinding. Ben stood at the center, guitar in hand, and the roar of the crowd was a wave of sound. He looked out, his eyes finding the empty seat in the front row, marked only by a single white rose. He played every song for that empty seat. He poured a decade of silent love, of friendship, of grief and gratitude into the music. In the screaming applause, he thought he could see him just for a second. A young man in a white t-shirt, smiling, giving him a thumbs up. After the last encore, drenched in sweat and emotion, Ben went back to his silent apartment. He picked up the notepad, tracing the blank last line with his thumb. He finally understood. Mason's final wish wasn't written down because it wasn't for himself. It was this. It was Ben standing in the light, finally seen. It was a legacy of belief, passed from a dying friend to one who had always loved him, quietly and completely, from the shadows.